What are the challenges for facing Bristol at the moment?
I think the biggest challenge I have is ensuring that we have good transport, good housing, good skills to enable us to make the most of what we've got, because we all know that productivity is a challenge, and those are all a bar to productivity. We do punch above the national average, but nevertheless, I believe that there's a huge way to go, both in terms of productivity and in fairness across the city. A city that's relatively well off means that if you're poor in Bristol, you're poorer than if you're poor in Liverpool, because you're spending a greater proportion of your of what you've got on your housing, which leaves you with less. So I think I've got the challenge, ironically, of being a relatively wealthy city. So it's a mini version of London's challenge.
And how will devolution help you to tackle some of those challenges?
Well, I think dealing with those issues that I've talked about, transport is a nightmare to deal with at the moment. If I look back at the history of Bristol's transport over the last 20 years, it's about getting very little done as a result of the amount of negotiation you have to do with central government in order to get agreement for anything, and us not being in control of the priorities. So the priorities coming down from Whitehall, Westminster. And so I think that being able to agree amongst four authorities within the structure of something that's closer to an integrated transport authority than a relatively loose arrangement that we currently have.
And at the moment, government seems to be prioritising the Northern Powerhouse and the transport for the North infrastructure. Is there a risk that Bristol gets left out?
I don't think there's a risk we get left out. There's a risk we fall behind. And I think there is a risk that the current advantage that we have gets lost. And that's a conversation that I'm having not just with the three surrounding authorities, because the four authorities that make up Greater Bristol, known as the West of England, but also with Cardiff and Newport in what we're calling the Great Western Cities, because we both are we're at the end of a branch line from London, and we're not properly connected into the network that's going to be and from the Midlands to the north. And so I'm emphasising very strongly that we need to sort out not just the transport within our own travel to work area, we desperately need to link up to the rest of the UK. The danger is, at the moment, our transport is planned all to London. London is great. I have absolutely nothing against London. I think we all benefit from London's success. But it's really important that as core cities, as Bristol and Cardiff, that we have a relationship with the Midlands and the North.
Bristol voted for a mayor, and Greater Manchester seems to be forced to have one, and other places are accepting that gradually as the price for devolution. Do you think that should happen? Do you think that having a mayor should be the price of devolution?
Well, I think it would be very silly to turn down a devolution package simply because one didn't want a mayor. I am ambitious I'm ambitious for Bristol to the extent that I realise a deal has to be done. I have no problem with combined authority and a mayor. I think that there is a little way to travel for us all to agree on that model exactly, but I think we're getting pretty close to it. And then it gets down almost to semantics about what is that legal entity at the centre. Because we agree on a combined authority, we agree on a legal entity at the centre. What name do you put on it? Seems a very poor reason to turn down an offer that will improve the lives of the people in the Bristol area.
And what happens if the local leaders aren't up to scratch? What happens for a place where its leadership, its capacity to respond to its needs lets people down?
Well, what if? I mean, that's that's a supposition. I think that it's up to local people to see that they do get that local leadership. I think Bristol, whatever you think has happened over the last 3 years with me as mayor, there's a huge difference in the level of recognition of leadership. There's a huge difference in knowing who to blame. I'm to blame for everything. It's not about power, but it is about realization about what are the issues that really will affect the world. And I think there's a really major truth, and I've experienced this over the last 3 years, that somebody who's running a city is closer to the problems and solutions than somebody who's running a country, who tends to be rather more isolated from the people that they're dealing with. You know, they'll turn up grandly and open a school or something. But in terms of that day-to-day contact, which I have by walking or cycling through the city or going to various community events or whatever, or dealing with the refugee crisis or whatever, I am much closer to the problems and solutions. So I think that what I have found is that the meeting of mayors that we have a lot, and I believe it's really important that we get together in various different circumstances. I think that we all learn a lot, and that we are the best educators of national governments. And I do think an awful lot of bad legislation has been made because there hasn't been enough reference to local authorities and cities about what the real issues are. I don't think that this is a zero-sum game. I think that this is about improvement for all, and inevitably it's not going to be equal, but I do think that there ought to be a general political driver, and this is what national central government should be about adjusting for fairness. But I have a huge issue of adjusting for fairness within the city itself, and I think actually there are bigger divides within our cities, and I've just been discussing the same with Richard Lees in Manchester. We both got major divides in our cities that will be a brake on progress if we don't address those more effectively. But it's really difficult in the current economic circumstances where money is taken away from central government, which is what makes it so important. We're more in control of our own in control of our own policy making and future.
Bristol is the only city outside of London to contribute in a net positive way to the Treasury. The core cities are also talking about fiscal retention as being the next step along the devolution programme. That might suggest that actually Bristol still has a role to play in subsidising other less productive areas of the country. How do you think the people of Bristol would feel about that?
Well, I think we are in a real term, because of our positive contribution to the national economy. I think that is what I see as us, whether you call it subsidising the country, but contributing to the country in the same way London does. Actually, Cardiff makes a positive contribution to the national economy as well. So you're right in terms of the English core cities, and which makes it all the more attractive, I think, to government to invest in what we're calling Great Western cities or Great Western Powerhouse, because I believe that you get better return from that investment in success. I think while we have such a broad range in terms of wealth and poverty, it would be a bit of an ask for us to have stuff taken away from us when we need greater investment in order to narrow that gap. And housing would be the area where I think we need billions into housing, because it is we're in danger of creating a social problem that will be a brake on productivity and the economy if we're not careful.
And will you run to be Greater Bristol's Metro Mayor?
No. I think there are two reasons for that. One is I think there's a natural suspicion of, and this is endemic wherever you look around the country, there's a natural suspicion of, by the surrounding authorities of the centre, of the city at the centre. And I think I wanted to reassure the surrounding leaders that this is not about personal ambition. And also, I think, since it will take time to happen, and I have said that I'm going to step down in 2020 if re-elected this May, that I think it would be better if it goes to somebody younger who can see 10 years ahead.